Sometimes love isn't enough. As an adoptive mom, people would often say this to me, as if to imply I couldn't love my son enough to change behaviors or heal his trauma, so I should probably just give up. At least that's how I took those four powerful words, which had buried themselves deeply in my mind, leading me to doubt my ability to parent my child. Sometimes love isn't enough. That is the truth. Oftentimes, you need love and powerful, personalized tools to raise a child who's experienced trauma and disrupted attachment, or a child who you're struggling to connect with. I am on a mission to help parents raising kids with a tricky past to show up with unconditional love and practical tools to lovingly manage even the most challenging of times. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. Plus, if you like what you hear, I'd love for you to leave a review. Now let's get to the good stuff. Welcome back to Sometimes Love Isn't Enough. I'm Angie, and I am your host for this podcast where we talk about raising kids with challenging behaviors. In particular, I focus a ton on kids who've experienced trauma, as well as kids who display behaviors that leave us as parents really struggling to connect with our kids. I also have been sprinkling in some human design here in this podcast because, man, once I started learning about my design and the design of people that I love, it has created so much validation for my experience as a parent and just my experience in interacting with others. And it has confirmed things that I knew about myself all along, but, not by any wrongdoing of anybody, really, but were things that I was conditioned to believe were wrong about me. So learning about human design, understanding myself more fully has just led to such a beautiful way to accept myself more and more. And so I'm on a mission to use this powerful tool to help other parents to get unstuck, to not only get unstuck with our perspectives of ourselves, but also of our kids. And so for today's episode, I wanted to actually talk about my experience as a generator as I've parented my projector kids. Both of my kids are the projector type. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that in case you're new to human design. So just a very basic overview. Human design is it's a personality assessment. The difference between human design and other assessments that you've taken is that it's based solely on our birth data. And so what does that mean? Well, any other personality assessment you take, whether you learn about the 5 love languages or you've taken the Myers-Briggs or whatever it might be, when you take those assessments, it's your mind that's taking those tests. And what do I mean by that? Well, our mind has been taught, conditioned, whatever word you want to use, but our mind has been taught over the decades of our life to look at the world in a particular way. Oftentimes, we're taught how to look at the world through our parents' eyes or through what we learned in school, maybe the friends or the people that we surround ourselves with. Maybe in your current life, you look at the world and you look at people and you look at interactions based on who you surround yourself in your career, if that's something important to you. But here's the scoop. We all were born with this beautiful, perfect design, whatever you want to think about that. And whatever spiritual or religious group that you follow, it actually doesn't matter when it comes to human design because the premise is that we are all born with this perfect plan of who we're supposed to be, what role we're supposed to fulfill on this planet. But living life veers us off that path, and not by any wrongdoing by anybody. So I'm going to share a little bit about my experience. But when we talk about human design, there are 5 types. two of those types are what we call generator types. One is called a pure generator, and the other one is called a manifesting generator. Don't get hung up on those words. Essentially, what that means is about 70% of the population is a generator type. And what does that mean? Well, about 70% of the population has consistent energy, and that energy is work and life force energy. So that means about 70% of the population has consistent energy to do the work of the world, whether that's, working a day job, it's being creative, whatever it might be. And also 70% of the population has consistent energy to also recreate the population. So I say that that does not in any way mean that all types are here to help, recreate the population and help us grow and learn. But what I am saying is that about 70% of us have consistent energy to do so. So then what happens with the rest of the population, the other 30%? Well, the other 30% also has energy. They just don't have access to consistent energy. And so when we think about people who, some people you can look at the people in your home, in your family. There are some people who get up at the crack of dawn, they work a full-time job, they come home from work, they're excited to do, maybe another project, or they might have hobbies, or they might have a second job or source of income that they're working on, and they'll go, go, go until they fall asleep at night, oftentimes, unless they're not living their full true selves. Then that generator type might really struggle with burnout. So I'm a generator type, when we're not doing work that we love, we quickly and easily can burn out. And so in general, the generator types have consistent work energy and love the work that they do. But when we're stuck in a job because we were conditioned perhaps to think that we needed to follow a certain path in our life, then oftentimes the generator type can be stuck doing work that they don't love, which can create a pretty extreme burnout actually for the generator type, and can leave generators feeling frustrated. You know that a generator is not on track with their life's purpose if you're experiencing frustration with them. That is the go-to kind of negative energy that a generator type experiences. So like I said, I am a generator type. My whole life, that's been who I've been. While I was in high school, I worked, I was always working, sometimes working 40 hours a week while I was in high school. I couldn't wait to get to college and also work full time while I was there. I've always been working, having extra hobbies. I work until I crash at the end of the day most days. It's really hard actually for me to relax. It's hard for me to just sit and watch a series on Netflix or to enjoy quiet time. That's really hard for me because I have this consistent energy. There are also other parts of my design, and we're not going to get into during this episode, but there are other parts of my design that also can make it challenging for me to relax, even though it's actually in my blueprint of who I am. That's actually where I really can mine my gifts. That's really where I shine, is when I take that time to take care of me, that my true gifts shine. But again, that's for another episode. But what I really want to share is that's the experience of a generator, is that energy to go, 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 work, 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 do, do, do. It is my role on this planet, and I've been fulfilling it. Not to the fullest extent because I didn't understand really what my purpose was. I do now, but that's been my experience. But both of my kids are non-generator types. So both of my kids are what's called a projector in the human design world. They are a projector. In order to be a projector type, they cannot have that defined sacral or that life and workforce energy center. So what does that mean? Well, for somebody who is that projector type, what that means is that they don't have consistent work energy. They don't have the energy to oftentimes, in a healthy way, sustain full-time work. But projectors live in a generator's world, right? Like I said, the generators are 70% of the population. And so when we have our kids, our friends, our family who don't have that consistent life and workforce energy, that consistent sacral energy, but they're surrounded by people who do, here's what happens. Well, a couple of things happen. One is in our human design, there are 9 different centers. The one that we're talking about today is that sacral center. But this is true for any of the centers, but we're going to focus on the sacral center. So when a center is undefined or open, it doesn't have that consistent energy. However, it has the ability to amplify and experience that sacral energy from other people that are around them. So, for example, like I said, I'm a generator type. Both of my kids are projectors. And so when with me or other generators, my kids have the ability to work, do, get things done. But when on their own or with other projector types or other types who don't have that defined sacral, having the energy to get a lot of work done can be really, really hard and exhausting and depleting. So when you think about children being raised in a home, projector children being raised in a home where their family members are that generator type, where they have that consistent work energy, where these kids are sometimes experiencing bursts of energy because they're kind of feeding off of the energy of those around them. That energy, I imagine, I'm not a projector type, but I imagine that that energy can feel exciting, like, yes, I can get some things done right now. And then when they're physically separated from people who have that workforce energy, they can quickly feel depleted and exhausted. And more importantly, they can quickly feel inadequate, right? Because like I said, the generator type is 70% of the population, which means all around them, the non-generator type, so manifestors, projectors, and reflectors, those are the 3 non-generator types. When they see all around them that people are able to work, 40 plus hours a week and get things done and have these projects that they can stick to consistently, and they themselves try to do things, and it's hard to follow through. It's hard to complete because they don't have the consistent energy and they feel depleted. That what I hear time and time again from projectors in my life is that that inconsistent energy can be really hard to handle, and they themselves can really struggle with sense of self-worth because they're looking at the standard of workforce energy and seeing that those around them, those that they look up to, those that they experience energy from, have the ability to have that consistent energy and they themselves don't. And so here's what I've experienced in my home is that, like I said, as mom, I go, go, go. I do. I'm, constantly busy and working, and oftentimes have some second kind of passion project that I'm working on above and beyond my daily work. And this is what my kids experienced from me is constant energy where I'm up, in the morning, ready to go off to work, sometimes doing side work before I go to work. And then I go to work and I come home and I do more work at home. And this is what my kids have experienced. And before I knew human design, what I would watch happen in my own home with my kids is my own frustration because chores, for example, my kids really struggled to get chores done. Both of them did. And my kids have 2 very different biologies, 2 very different histories, 2 very different experiences in life. And both of them had the same struggles with getting chores done. And as a parent, it can look like our kids are being lazy or defiant. It can look like our kids don't care. It can make us as parents feel like we haven't done a good enough job to outline clear expectations for them, right? Like, why can't my kids keep their room clean and picked up? Why can't my kids help out with chores? Why do I have to keep reminding my kids about chores, right? This was a struggle for my kids' entire childhood. And I was using all kinds of um, positive reward systems and behavior management strategies and really trying to support my kids' success with doing chores. And it was a real struggle for both of them in very different ways, but it was a struggle for both of them all along. It's not like they went through a phase where they wanted to be a big helper and they could consistently do things to help, and then that faded away developmentally. That really wasn't ever a thing. They both went through phases of wanting to be a helper, but it was fleeting. And I now know that they were probably actually borrowing my energy. They were experiencing my workforce energy to be a big helper. But then when it came to doing chores, unless I was right there and I felt like, why do I have to supervise my kids? They're big enough to take care of chores. These are the thoughts that went through my head is my kids are big enough to take care of chores, big enough to pick up their room on their own. Why do I have to stay with them? Because I didn't know. I didn't know that they didn't have that access to energy to actually get it done. To me, it looked like they maybe struggled with planning is one thing that crossed my mind, right? Like maybe my kids struggle with executive functioning. Maybe they can't carry out a sequence of events. That's something that crossed my mind. Sometimes I wondered if maybe I hadn't done a good enough job of parenting, that I hadn't held my expectations enough. Maybe I was too wishy-washy with them. I don't know. But these are things that went through my head. I beat myself up because my kids didn't have energy to complete chores. And so now knowing, and the same thing applied then when they went, to get a job or to do other things, right? For both of my kids, although their struggles looked different, they both had the same struggles with having consistent energy to get things done, to work 40 hours a week, to find ways to sustain their energy, to do what they perceived they needed to do to move on to adulthood. So then a couple of years ago, I learned about human design. I first started studying myself and understanding myself and really digging deep to understand myself. And oh my gosh, what the validation for the things that I have experienced throughout my entire life that quite frankly, I I kind of squished those things away because I felt like I didn't fit in. I felt like maybe I was broken or there was something wrong with me. And then at 40 plus years old, to see it laid out clear as day in my design that, for example, I've gotten lots of feedback about being so introverted. And, I would get a lot of push like, why do you just sit so quietly when we're at the social thing? Like, why don't you go out and interact with people? It's in my design. It isn't that I had had experiences that led me to pull back more. And I'm not saying that I didn't, but it's actually in my design. I am supposed to withdraw so that I can integrate and process and really serve others. I do that best when I take time for myself. But back to the generator projector type. When I started studying my kids' design and talking with other projectors and really trying to understand the experience of a projector, the way that I look at my kids is so incredibly different now than it was even a year ago because I have such a greater understanding and appreciation for my kids. Because what I've shared so far about the projector type, that's not the whole deal, right? Like I said, the generator type, my role on this planet, if we think about the 5 types, all have a very specific role to fulfill on this planet. The generator types are here to do the work of the world and to become masterful at doing that work. It is our job to physically be out there doing the work. And I say physically, for some generator types, it's more of a mental job, but the work is the work is the work, and it's our job to do it. And I am dedicated to doing my part on this planet to help. The projector type, their role on this planet isn't to do the work. It's actually to guide us generators, right? So the projector's role is to understand what humanity needs and to guide us to do it, which sounds pretty wild. But when I look back, I think about example after example after example with my daughter. So I I remember when she was very little, she has had a bold, confident personality since she was very little. And I'll never forget. So she was in elementary school, and I go to that first conference for I think it was first grade. And her teacher had said, she was concerned about my daughter's behaviors. And so I said, what do you mean? And she said, she's disruptive. She, interrupts the other kids when they're trying to answer questions. She shouts out the answers, and she's even corrected me when I've been wrong, is what the teacher said. And I remember asking the teacher, well, but was she right? And the teacher said, that's not the point. She's being disrespectful. And I said, but that is the point. If my job as a parent is to help my child feel empowered and to see where they fit into this world, then absolutely, if it is my daughter's place and my son's place to guide the planet, and I didn't know this back then, but I knew that when I was getting feedback about my child's behaviors, as they were called, and what I saw was a confident child who saw that something was wrong and she wanted to right it. Well, I'm not going to squash that in her. Clearly, it was something that mattered to her. And, perhaps she could learn a different approach, but that theme continued with her throughout school. And I remember at, many interactions with school staff about these perceived behaviors. And I just remember saying time after time again, I started in later elementary school saying, someday she will have people in her life who appreciate what she's bringing here. And of course, when she started middle school, I remember getting feedback exactly as I had expected. I started getting feedback about, wow, she has something really special to share with this world. I saw that. I knew it. I didn't quite understand why she felt so compelled to share what was on her mind, because I sure don't. But clearly it was something that mattered to her. And I'm just so grateful that I had the intuition to really advocate for her and to not back down and let people squish that part of her, because now at 23 years old, she continues to tell people, what she sees and how this has evolved as my kids are now, one is 18, soon to be 19, and the other is 23. And now that I understand their design and that they have this gift to guide the rest of us, I use that to connect with them. I ask my kids their opinions about what I should do or what they think about. We've been talking about food a lot lately, and I really let them know how much I appreciate them. I acknowledge what they're sharing with me. I ask for their advice and insight, even though they're still just my babies in many, many ways. But I want them to shine their gifts out onto the world as much as they can, as much as they're comfortable doing, because that's what they're here to do. And so the last, I guess, part that I want to leave you with here is I really want to implore you to understand your design. I am actually offering human design readings. So, and in my reading, I walk you through some very powerful parts of your design. So even if you've been doing human design for a while, I'm going to share some really powerful parts of your design that help you connect with others, because that's what I'm all about. I'm on a mission to, quite frankly, disrupt the cycle of trauma. And although I I'm not saying that we're traumatizing our kids by not knowing their design, I do know that there are things that, man, had I known my kids' design, I would have approached them so differently. Because as young adults, I see that my kids feel less than because they didn't have that consistent work energy. And keeping a job or like working a job is hard for both of them. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think it's part of their design for lots of different parts of their design, not just being a projector. But I see that it has created struggles for them because I didn't know. I didn't know how to really ask them for their insight about things because, quite frankly, they've been projectors since they were born. And there are things that I could have been asking and guiding them to since they were little, but I didn't know that. And so I'm on a mission to help parents better understand ourselves because the gifts that I have gained by understanding who I am and breaking free from so much conditioning that has happened to me over a lifetime. Let's face it, we've all been conditioned because unless your parents knew your human design, knew exactly your energy, exactly who you were supposed to be, and even if they did, even if your kids knew your design, totally understood human design, all life is happening around us, and we are conditioned by the energy we experience from others. But I do think that understanding our design so that we can show up in the highest frequency of ourselves, but then understanding our kids' designs so that we can provide them what they need from us in such a more powerful way, not such a cookie cutter way, right? I think about, behavioral recommendations for kids. Well, not all kids are the same, not even close to being the same. We have to show up for our kids differently because they're different. Our kids are unique like snowflakes, and they need something different from each of us. Our kids all need unique things from us. So, my tip for you, if you are a generator, well, my first tip is book a reading. I would love to help you navigate yourself. And then we can talk about learning more about your kids. I know I'm so confident that you will find that reading so incredibly powerful in understanding you and then understanding your kids. So that's my first recommendation is book a reading. And I'm not just going to tell you about you. I'm going to help you see where to do some digger deeping to better understand you. So that's one thing. But even if you're not ready to book a reading, that's okay. Because if you are a generator and you know just that much, if you're a generator and you are raising a projector, here are my tips for you. Make sure that your projector type children have regular cycles of rest. They more likely than not do not have the energy to even go through an entire day the way that you do. Some projector types can, and I've heard experiences where some projector types can really dedicate time, like one day each week, where it's just they don't do anything that day. But oftentimes, what I have heard is that many projector types need regular breaks or rest cycles every day during their day. So do your part to help them with that. It isn't about giving in. It isn't about letting our kids be lazy. It's about helping them recharge so that they can do important work in this world. And you might not see yet that your, 5-year-old or 8-year-old or 13-year-old has important work to do on this planet, but I assure you that they do. So that's my first tip is help your projector child get regular rest and not just rest at night. One small tip about the projector type is they actually shouldn't lay down in bed when they're exhausted. A projector type, in order to get the best possible sleep, they should lay down flat in bed about an hour before they fall asleep. So for our little ones, that might mean reading a book with them, or no electronics though, but playing with, maybe learning how to crochet or do some loom weaving or something of interest. But laying down flat in bed for about an hour before they fall asleep is really key to projector types getting good sleep. So it's my second tip is regular rest cycles. Make sure that they have a good sleep routine. And if possible, if projectors can sleep not near generators, that can also really be key, right? Because they amplify that generator energy, that workforce energy. And so that can be really unsettling for them when they're trying to sleep. Um, I don't even know what number we're on, but my next tip about when you're raising a projector is to make sure that you acknowledge and recognize them for what they're doing. It's really key actually to their feeling good about themselves is they need to be recognized for what they're doing. They need to know that you see them. They need to know that you see that they're doing good, important things. And so don't skip over that part. It's super important. And it can be really easy to be frustrated with our projector types because they have this ability. I don't even know if I want to say ability, but right, they protect their energy. And so when the projector type feels like their energy is being depleted, oftentimes they'll do things to keep people at bay. And sometimes they look like not so nice things, but it's really a bit of a defense mechanism to protect their energy. So make sure that you recognize and appreciate your projector types. And then the last really, really important tip, if you're raising a projector type, is to invite their ideas, to ask what they think about things, because they feel this strong desire to share their ideas about things. And they don't, especially when our kids are young, but honestly, if you're not studying human design or you haven't been given clear feedback about this, that projector type can oftentimes share their ideas when they're not invited, which can feel really icky to them, right? Because if a projector shares their idea and it's not well received by the person they're sharing it with, that disconnect can feel really icky to a projector, and they can feel like their ideas are being rejected. But the thing is, it's not their ideas. It oftentimes is the approach. And so as often as possible to invite our projector kids to share with us, to ask them, what they're thinking about or what they notice or what ideas they have can be incredibly powerful as we're parenting our projectors. So I hope that you learn a little bit about your design, learn a little bit about your kids' designs, and take these tips. If you're raising projector children, take these tips and see what you notice that's different when you approach your kids differently based on their type. So I will put the link to book a reading in the show notes. So check it out. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? Oh, and if you message me, I'll send you a coupon code. If you let me know that you heard this episode about generators raising projectors, send me a message and I'll send you that coupon code. I would love to connect with you. So that's it. I hope you found this super valuable and we will talk soon. I hope that you found this episode so incredibly powerful. Thank you for joining us for Sometimes Love Isn't Enough. If you resonated with what you heard here, please subscribe to this podcast and give us a review. You can also follow us on all the socials. Check the show notes for all the details about how to start tackling behaviors and creating a powerful, loving relationship with your child, a child who needs your love the most. And if your gut's telling you that it's time for a change now, book a free consult. I'd love to help you love unconditionally and show you that you have that power within you.